Hi there. In this video, we're going to talk about using the distributive property. This is a very, very important thing to help us simplify something, to help us do math later on, okay? But there's an important thing that you can realize about the distributive property, and that's doing mental math using the distributive property. Now, I struggle with mental math, but one of the things that we can do with mental math is, like if I wanted to evaluate and multiply 8 times 17, those numbers are pretty hard to do in my head. But what I can do is I can rewrite this using using parentheses. All right, so let's rewrite this, and I would rewrite this as 8 times the quantity 10 plus 7. Now, what the distributive property states is that when I have a number, multiplying it by a quantity, I can multiply that number by each of the individual numbers inside and then add them together later. All right, so what I did was I rewrote 17 as the sum of 10 and 7. All right, 10 plus 7 gives me 17. All right, so that's true. This works. But what I can now do is I can now do 8 times 10 and then plus 8 times 7. Now, 8 times 10 is a little bit more manageable. This is should be some math that we know how to do. So 8 times 10 is going to give me 80. And then 8 times 7 is going to give me 56. So then if I wanted to add these numbers together, and adding this is a little bit tricky, but I would rewrite this as 80 plus 50 plus 6. Now I could do 80 plus 50. That's going to give me 130. And then add the 6 in there, and my answer is going to be 136. So this is one of those tactics that allows me to do mental math in my head. So what I have to do is and this is the steps that I do in my head. You can do this totally on paper, but this is something that's helped me. All right, and what we're doing is the distributive property. Means that if I take some number out here and multiply it by the inside numbers and then add them together. So this step from here to here is the distributive property. Now what I want to do, since we've done this just with numbers and you see how this works, what I want to do is extend this to using variables and how to simplify expressions using the distributive property. So on an example like this, if all I'm doing is rewriting this expression using the distributive property, what I want to do is take my outside number, all right, next to my parentheses, and multiply it by each of the numbers on the inside. So what I do is I write it like this. I say 4 times n plus 4 times 2. Now, 4 times n, I can't evaluate that. If I don't know what n is, I simply just leave it as 4 times n. But I can do the math for 4 times 2, and that's plus 8. Okay, so all I'm doing is rewriting this here using the distributive property. And the only time that I'm going to do that is when my number is on the outside of the parentheses and simply is just next to those parentheses. Now in this example, I want to do the same thing. I want to take what I have here and rewrite it and simplify it using the distributive property. So the same thing's going to hold. Because I have a 3 on the outside of my parentheses here, and it's just right next to this parenthesis, what I want to do is multiply it by each of the numbers inside of my parentheses. So I'm going to take 3 times r. So I'm going to do 3 times r. And then I've got 3 times negative 5. So what I do here, whenever I have a negative on the inside, and this is the part that screws people up, is that I'm going to put a plus here, okay? And I'm going to now take 3 and multiply it by negative 5, okay? And then on the last part, I've just got this single plus 2 out here, so I'm going to put in my plus 2. Now when I do 3 times r, that's just my expression, okay? I'm doing 3 times some number r. I just leave it like that. So I'm going to write this as 3r plus 3 times negative 5. So 3 times negative 5, positive times a negative is a negative, 3 times 5 is 15. So this is going to be plus negative 15, and then plus 2. Now what I want to do is combine my numbers here, okay? If I have negative 15 plus 2, I can add these two numbers together. All right, and negative 15 plus 2 is going to give me negative 13. So my final answer here is 3r plus negative 13. And I could also write this as 3r minus 13. So however you want to write it, it doesn't matter. However, we want to make sure that we can go from here and do the math that's necessary. So here we're just distributing our 3, evaluating it, and then combining our like terms and getting it into the simplest possible form that we can. And the reality is that I can't add or subtract these two numbers and combine them. All right, this has an r and this one doesn't. Okay, but now let's look at an example where we would combine those. So on this one, again, all I'm doing is I'm rewriting this using the distributive property, and I've got 3 times the quantity, x plus 2, minus 4 times the quantity, x minus 5. All right, now we've got some negative signs in here, and we've got 2 different ones. I'm going to show you how we would do this. All right, so the first thing I want to do is distribute my 3 in my first part. The next thing I want to do is distribute the entire negative 4 into each of these numbers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. All right, let's distribute our 3. So I've got 3 times x plus 3 times 2. Now what I've got is I've got negative 4 times x. Now what I always do here is I do a plus. Okay, and the reason why I do a plus is because I can still just carry my negative over even if I put a plus down. All right, so what I'm going to do from here is now I'm going to do negative 4 times x. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put another plus in here because I'm going to write this as negative 4 times negative 5. All right, the signs is the part that will screw you guys up. All right, and that's okay. But what I want to do here is now multiply my numbers, and then let's combine what we can, and then we'll simplify. So from here, I've got 3 times x. That's it. That is what it is. All right, I'm just going to write it as 3x. 3 times 2, now those I can evaluate. 3 times 2, and that's going to give me 6. Then what I've got is I've got negative 4 times x. So I'm going to write it out as plus negative 4x. Okay? Now the next thing I want to do is plus. Now I've got a negative times a negative, which is going to give me a positive. So negative 4 times negative 5 is going to give me a positive 20. Okay? So now what we can do is we can now do what's called combine like terms. All right? And what I want to combine are the things that are common. All right? Things that are like. Now what I notice here is that I've got a 3x and a negative 4x. Because these both contain x's, I can combine them. And all I'm going to do is add my numbers in front of my variable and keep my variable. All right, the other numbers that are like is going to be the numbers 6 and 20. Okay, so let's first do the 3x and minus 4x. So 3 minus 4 is negative 1. So I write this out as negative 1 times x, and then plus 6 plus 20 is 26, okay? And that's how I get that. Now, what I would do here, if I have negative 1 times x, I would just write that simply as negative x, all right? And then plus 26. So I could write it like this. I could also write it as 26 plus negative x, or I could write it as 26 minus x. All of these things mean the same thing, all right? Now, this question is really hard. Okay, there's a lot of things going on, and this is really doing some heavy algebra. However, I'm not doing anything different. All I'm doing is I'm incorporating more steps, utilizing some negatives, and going from there. All right, so my suggestion is rewatch this part a couple of times if this didn't make sense. All right, and then hopefully, my hope is that when you read something, that when you guys are doing math, that you go from one step to the next, and you're able to explain, well, how did I go from this step to this step? Oh, you distributed the 3 here. Oh, you distributed the -4. Here, I did a little bit of simplification, multiplied my numbers together, and then on this step, I combined like terms, and then I wrote my answer as a final answer. So something to consider, all right? But just rewatch this part if it didn't make any sense. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye!